It was just a regular night. I had just gotten off work, feeling the weight of another long, exhausting day pressing on me. The office had been a mess, my mind occupied with deadlines and the never-ending to-do list. I always seemed to be at work late, and honestly, at this point, I was used to it. My routine had become a blur: wake up, go to work, come home late, rinse and repeat. My wife, Sarah, was used to it too, or so I thought. I pulled into the parking lot of a quiet little diner, deciding to grab some food before heading home. The place was practically empty, save for a few truckers nursing coffee in the corner. I was starving but had no energy to cook, so I figured a quick meal would do. I parked, let the engine idle for a moment, and sat back in the seat, scrolling through my phone. The world outside the car seemed distant, almost like a dream. But then a sudden knock on my window snapped me out of my thoughts. Startled, I jerked back, my heart racing for a second as I looked up. A girl, probably in her 20s, was standing there, her face serious but calm. She had a look in her eyes that made me feel instantly uneasy, but I couldn't place it. I rolled the window down a little, unsure of what to expect. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to sound casual despite the unease creeping up inside of me. Without a word, she pulled out her phone and tapped the screen. "Watch this," she said, her voice calm but firm. I was taken aback by her directness, but I found myself nodding, unsure of what else to do. She didn't ask for permission, didn't explain anything further, just showed me the phone. I stared at the screen, and the world seemed to stop around me as the video began to play. The first thing I saw was Sarah, my wife, lying in our bed. At first it didn't register. It looked like just another normal night. She was wearing her usual oversized t-shirt, the one she always wore to bed, her hair messy from sleep. But then the camera panned slightly, and there was another man beside her. He was close to her, too close, and the way they were positioned, how comfortable they looked together, made my stomach churn. Something was off, but I couldn't understand why. The man on the screen, with a cocky smile, looked directly into the camera and said, "This loser spends his nights at work while I literally live in his house." The words felt like a slap to the face, but they were just the beginning. As the man continued talking, my brain struggled to process what was happening. The man's voice, filled with an arrogance I couldn't ignore, made my blood run cold. "I get to be here every night while he's away, pretending he's providing for her," he added. My heart sank. Every word felt like it was aimed directly at me, as if he knew how much I sacrificed for my family. I wanted to turn away from the screen, to close my eyes and pretend none of it was real, but I couldn't. I was glued to it, unable to tear myself away. The man's words echoed in my mind, each sentence hammering the truth into me. I had been so busy with work, so focused on providing, that I had neglected everything else. And now here I was, watching a stranger in my own bed, saying things I never thought I'd hear. The girl standing outside my car, still staring at me with intensity in her eyes, didn't say a word. She didn't need to. The video spoke for itself. Her silence only made the words hit harder, like a quiet confirmation of the nightmare unfolding before me. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. My mind was in chaos, racing through every moment I'd spent at work. Every time I told Sarah I was too tired to spend time with her. Was that it? Was that what had caused this? Had I pushed her away by choosing work over everything else? The guilt hit me like a wave, drowning out any rational thought. And then the girl spoke again, her voice cutting through my thoughts like a knife. "That man," she said, pointing at the screen, "is my father. He's been running your family with your wife for 2 years. Her words, blunt and matter-of-fact, landed with the force of a punch. I blinked, unsure of whether I heard her right. 2 years? I couldn't even wrap my mind around it. I thought I knew Sarah. I thought we had something real, something strong. But now it felt like everything was a lie. She didn't stop there. The words kept coming, each one breaking me a little more. He's been in your house, in your bed, living your life, all while you were out working. And I want him to pay for humiliating my mother." Her eyes were burning with anger, but there was something else in them, something cold, something calculated. I couldn't fathom what kind of pain she was carrying, but I could feel the weight of it in her gaze. She wasn't here for sympathy. She wasn't here to make me feel better. She was here for revenge. At this point, I was in too deep to back out. My brain was scrambled, struggling to understand the magnitude of what was happening. My wife, the woman I trusted, had been sleeping with this man, this stranger, for years. How could I have been so blind? How could she have done this to me? And now this girl, her daughter, was standing in front of me, telling me everything I had failed to see. She didn't give me a chance to process. Before I could speak, before I could ask a single question, she reached into her bag. I barely noticed what she was doing until she pulled out a small video camera, its lens gleaming in the dim light. My heart skipped a beat as she locked the car door. I hadn't even noticed her doing that. Why was she locking the door? What was happening? She turned back to face me, her expression steely. "Let's do this," she said, her voice as cold as the night air. And that's when I realized I wasn't just watching this video. I wasn't just learning the truth. I was part of whatever was about to happen. I wasn't sure what she meant by do this, but the fear settled in, creeping into every fiber of my being. This wasn't just about exposing the truth. This was something else, something bigger. And I had no idea where it was headed, but I knew I was about to find out. I was trapped, stuck between the crushing betrayal and this girl's unyielding desire for revenge. Everything I thought I knew about my life, about my marriage, was crumbling before my eyes, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. My mind was reeling. The words the girl had said still echoed in my head, the ones about her father and my wife, two people I had trusted more than anything. The video kept playing in my mind, on loop. The man lying in my bed, the comfort in his voice, the casualness of it all. I could see him in my thoughts, his arrogant smile, the way he spoke as if everything was his, my house, my wife, my life. It made my skin crawl, the very idea of him in my space, in my sanctuary, while I was out there working late, trying to provide. My gut twisted in knots, and I could feel my pulse racing as the realization set in that none of it had been real. I had been so focused on making sure everything was fine, working late, paying the bills, thinking that everything was stable, that I missed the cracks, the signs, the little things. How often she had said she was too tired to spend time with me. How many nights had I told her to just get some rest, not realizing that maybe it wasn't just exhaustion. Maybe it was guilt, maybe she had already checked out, and I was too blind to see it. I never imagined she could betray me like this. Not Sarah, not my wife. She had always been so perfect in my eyes, at least I thought she was. But that video, those words from the man in my bed, shattered every illusion I had built. Everything I thought was solid, real, was now crumbling into pieces around me. And then there was the girl, her voice, so cold and matter-of-fact, almost like she was talking about something as trivial as the weather. But what she had told me, it was anything but trivial. The truth she had laid before me hit harder than anything I could have imagined. Her father, the man I didn't even know existed, had been living a double life. He had been with my wife for 2 years, all while I was absent, thinking I was doing the right thing by working late. The guilt hit me like a ton of bricks. How could I have been so focused on work, so caught up in the daily grind, that I never noticed what was happening in my own home? I had been living in a bubble, convinced that everything was fine, and now it felt like the world was collapsing around me, piece by piece. I kept replaying the video in my head, trying to make sense of it. The way the man in the bed had spoken so casually about my life. "This loser spends his nights at work while I literally live in his house," he had said. His words stung with a bitterness I hadn't expected. They made it clear how little he thought of me, how easily he had taken over my life. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but nothing came out. It felt like my mouth was dry, like my voice had been stolen from me. All I could do was sit there, staring at the girl as she watched me, waiting for some kind of reaction. But what was I supposed to say? What could I even say? I couldn't even wrap my head around what had happened. My wife had been living a secret life, and I had been completely oblivious. I thought she was just busy, tired from the pressures of life, from everything going on. But now it was all so clear, too clear. And the more I thought about it, the more it ate at me. Was she ever really mine? Had I ever really known her? The pain of betrayal gnawed at my insides, and it wasn't just from the man in the video, it was from Sarah too. From the woman I had trusted more than anyone in my life. The girl, standing there with that cold look in her eyes, wasn't letting me off the hook. Her presence, the way she stood so firmly in front of me, only made the weight of the situation more unbearable. She wasn't angry in the way I thought she might be. There was no yelling, no accusations. It was all so calculated, so precise. She had planned this. She had set everything up, knowing exactly what she was doing. She wasn't here for answers. She wasn't here to make me feel better. She was here to make sure her father paid for what he had done, for what he had taken from her mother, from my family. And somehow, I was a part of it. Her words replayed in my mind. He's been running your family with your wife for 2 years, 2 years. 2 years of my life had been a lie. 2 years of trust, of love, all built on a foundation that was now completely shattered. It felt like a weight pressing down on my chest, and I couldn't breathe. The guilt, the betrayal, the realization of how blind I had been, all of it came crashing down at once, and I felt like I was suffocating. And then she did something that made my heart stop. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small video camera. I didn't know what to think, what to do. My mind was still spinning, trying to make sense of everything, but all I could focus on was the camera in her hands. What was she going to do with it? Why was she filming this? And why was she locking the door? My heart began to race again as the fear started to creep in. She wasn't here to comfort me. She wasn't here to comfort me. She wasn't here to help me process this. She was here for something else entirely. She locked the car door, and my body stiffened. I tried to move, to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. My mind was blank, my body frozen in place. She was so calm, so controlled. It was as if she had been planning this for a long time. I didn't know who she was, but I could feel the anger in her, the fire behind her eyes. She wasn't just trying to get revenge on her father for what he had done to her mother. She was doing this for herself, for the pain she had been carrying all this time. "Let's do this," she said, and the way she said it sent a chill through me. There was no hesitation in her voice, no second thoughts. It was like she had made up her mind, and now there was no turning back. My mind raced even faster now, but it felt like I was in some kind of trance. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. I was trapped, stuck in the middle of this twisted reality that had unfolded around me. I had no idea what was going to happen next, but I knew one thing: I wasn't prepared for it. She wasn't just telling me what had happened. She wasn't just showing me the truth. She was taking control, and I was powerless to stop it. And as she stood there, her eyes locked on mine, I realized something else. This was bigger than me. This was a war between her and her father, with me caught in the crossfire. And whether I liked it or not, I was about to play a part in whatever was coming next. Everything had changed in an instant, and there was no going back. I sat there in my car, the air around me thick with tension, unable to move or speak. My eyes remained fixed on the girl standing outside, her hand still gripping the camera, as if she was about to shoot a film. Her cold stare was unwavering, and I couldn't help but feel small, like I was nothing more than a spectator in my own life. The words she had spoken to me kept replaying in my mind like an endless loop. Each time they seemed to hit harder. 2 years. 2 years of betrayal, of deceit. And I had been none the wiser. She didn't break her gaze. She was calm, almost eerily so, like everything she had just revealed to me was just another part of the plan. There was no rush in her movements, no emotion, just the slow, deliberate steps of someone who had already made up her mind about what needed to be done. I could tell she wasn't afraid of me. She wasn't afraid of anything. She was focused, determined, and I realized more than anything, she had no intention of letting me off easy. This wasn't going to be a quick confession or some moment of clarity. No, she was here for something far more personal, far more complicated. She wanted her revenge. She wanted me to feel the same way she felt, the way she'd probably been feeling for a long time. And then, there it was. The silence between us was deafening. I kept thinking she would say something else, that she might explain more about what was happening, about why she was here in the first place. But she didn't. Instead, she just kept standing there, staring at me like she was waiting for me to respond. But what could I say? What could I do? I was drowning in my own thoughts, my mind racing 100 miles a minute, but I couldn't seem to grasp any clear answer. I couldn't seem to find a way out of this mess I had stumbled into. I tried to gather myself to form a coherent thought, but all I could think about was the video of the man in my bed, the casual way he spoke about my life as if it didn't matter to him, the way he claimed ownership of everything I had worked so hard to build. His words echoed in my mind. This loser spends his nights at work while I literally live in his house. That phrase repeated in my ears, almost mocking me, reminding me of every night I had spent away from home, every moment I had chosen to focus on work instead of the woman I loved. It was too late for regrets now. The damage was already done. The girl was still standing there, her eyes locked on mine, as if she could see every single thought running through my head. Maybe she could. Maybe she was used to seeing people break, to seeing them crumble under the weight of their own guilt. But I couldn't help myself. I wanted to scream, to shout out every question I had, to demand answers. But I knew it wouldn't change anything. It wouldn't bring back the trust I had lost. It wouldn't take away the feeling of betrayal that was creeping into every corner of my mind, slowly consuming me. She moved a step closer, her expression never changing. It was like she was in control of everything now. She didn't need to say a word, but somehow, her presence alone commanded the room, commanding me. I felt powerless, like I was being drawn into a storm, and I couldn't stop it. I glanced at the camera in her hands. The lens stared back at me, cold and unblinking. "What are you going to do with that?" I finally managed to ask, my voice sounding weak in the silence. My words felt small, insignificant compared to the weight of what had just been revealed to me. But I needed to know. I had to know what came next. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she looked down at the camera for a moment, almost as if she was deciding whether or not to answer me. And then she spoke. "I'm going to make sure the world knows," she said. Her tone was even, as if the decision had already been made a long time ago. "My mother deserves justice, and so do you." The words hit me harder than I expected. Justice? What did that even mean in this situation? Who was she trying to punish? Her father? My wife? Me? In some twisted way, I realized she was doing this for her own reasons, for the hurt she had carried with her for so long. And yet, here I was, just another pawn in her game. I could feel my throat tightening, my chest rising and falling as I tried to keep my emotions in check. I was angry, I was devastated, but I was also scared. Scared of what she might do next, scared of what might happen if I didn't give her the answer she was looking for. She didn't seem to care about my emotions, though. She was beyond that. She was here for something more, something much bigger. Her focus was singular. And in that moment, I realized that this girl, this stranger, had more control over the situation than I did. She had been planning this for who knows how long. She had been watching me, gathering information, waiting for the right moment to confront me. And now here we were, and it wasn't just about me anymore. It was about her pain, about her revenge. I wanted to reach out, to tell her I wasn't the enemy, that I hadn't known about her father or what he had done, that I was just as much a victim in all of this as she was. But the words wouldn't come. I couldn't find the right way to say it, and somehow I knew it wouldn't matter. She wasn't interested in my excuses. She wasn't interested in my side of the story. She had already made up her mind about me, about everyone involved. Her eyes flicked back to the camera, and I could see a flicker of something: determination, maybe, or anger. She was resolute. This wasn't just about exposing the truth. This was about making sure her father paid for what he had done, for how he had destroyed her family. And as much as I hated it, I couldn't deny that she had every right to feel the way she did. No one should have to go through what she had gone through. No one should have to suffer in silence while someone else destroys everything they love. But what was I supposed to do? What could I do? I couldn't undo the past, couldn't change the way things had played out. I couldn't take back all the times I had neglected Sarah, all the times I had chosen work over our marriage. And now, standing here with this girl, I was forced to confront the harsh reality of it all. I had been living in a fantasy, thinking that everything was fine, when in reality it was all falling apart. And yet, as I sat there paralyzed by fear and guilt, I couldn't help but wonder what was her next move. What was she going to do with that camera, with that cold look in her eyes? Was I just a pawn, or was I a part of something bigger? I didn't know, but I was about to find out. And in that moment, I realized that this wasn't just about revenge. It was about the destruction of everything I had ever known. It was about the breaking down of every illusion I had held, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but the truth and the painful, inevitable consequences that came with it. The air inside the car felt suffocating. I couldn't get away from the girl's piercing gaze, her eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that sent a chill down my spine. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat heavier than the last as the realization of what was happening began to sink in. I had no control over anything anymore. I was no longer the man who made the decisions, the one who could fix things. Now I was just a passenger in my own life, being dragged along for a ride I hadn't even been prepared for. The camera in her hand seemed to grow larger in my mind with every passing second, its lens staring at me like an unforgiving judge, silently recording every word, every movement. There was no escape, no way to undo the damage that had already been done. My thoughts were chaotic, a whirlwind of emotions that I couldn't sort through. I wanted to ask her to stop, to tell her that I didn't deserve this, but I knew it would be futile. The truth was, I didn't know if I deserved anything better. The video, the betrayal, the lies, it was all starting to feel like something I had brought upon myself. The girl's presence didn't soften. She didn't flinch or look away, and that made it all the more terrifying. She was calm, methodical, even, as if she had rehearsed this moment 100 times in her mind. But I wasn't prepared for what she said next. Her voice was cool, almost clinical, as if this was all part of some kind of strange routine. "Your wife, she's not the person you think she is," she said, and the words hit me like a slap. It wasn't the first time I had heard something like that, but the way she said it so matter-of-factly sent a jolt of panic through my chest. I had been living in this bubble, in this idealized version of my marriage, and now it was all bursting around me. The truth was too much to bear, but I couldn't stop myself from listening. I couldn't look away. Her father, the man in the video, the one who had taken everything from me. She wasn't just speaking about the affair like it was some isolated incident. No, she was laying out the details, revealing the deeper layers of deceit that had been festering under the surface for years. Her words painted a picture of a woman I didn't know, a woman who had been playing me for a fool while I was out there thinking I was doing the right thing, thinking I was doing my part. I tried to steady my breathing, but it felt like I was suffocating. Every word the girl spoke only added to the weight on my chest. I couldn't even wrap my head around the idea that the woman I had shared my life with, the woman I had trusted more than anyone, had been living this secret life with a man I had never even met. How had I not known? How had I missed all the signs? I was supposed to be the one who noticed everything, the one who could see through the lies. But instead, I had been blind to it all. She continued to speak, detailing how her father had manipulated the situation, how he had slowly wormed his way into my life and my wife's. She described how he had taken advantage of my absence, my late nights at work, and how he had made himself comfortable in my home, in my bed. She didn't just want revenge on him, though. No, this was about something much bigger. She wanted me to understand the full scope of what had been happening behind my back. She wanted me to see the destruction he had caused not just to her family, but to mine as well. My stomach twisted as she spoke, the anger in her voice making it clear that she wasn't just some innocent bystander in this. She had been hurt. Her family had been torn apart. And as much as I hated to admit it, I had been a part of that destruction, even if I didn't know it at the time. I had been the one who had left her mother alone, who had been so caught up in my work that I hadn't seen what was happening right in front of me. The girl wasn't angry at me, not directly, but she was using me as a means to an end, and I could feel it in every fiber of my being. Her next words were like a punch to the gut. "I'm going to make sure everyone knows what kind of man you really are," she said, and I froze. The words didn't make sense at first, but then it clicked. She wasn't just after her father. She was after everyone who had played a part in this twisted web of lies. She was going to expose everything, not just to the people who needed to know, but to the entire world. The camera in her hands, once an intimidating presence, now felt like a weapon aimed directly at me. I could feel the heat of it on my skin, the knowledge that every movement, every word was being recorded. There was no turning back. If I didn't cooperate, if I didn't play along, I knew exactly what she would do. She would release everything. The video of my wife and the man. The truth. All of it. My world would be turned upside down in a matter of seconds. The guilt and shame hit me all over again, more intense this time. She was right. My wife had betrayed me, and I had let it happen. I had been too caught up in my own life, in my own ambitions, to see the cracks in our relationship. But now here I was, being forced to confront those cracks, and there was nothing I could do to fix it. The damage was done, and there was no way to turn back time. The girl watched me closely, as if waiting for me to break. Her eyes were unblinking, her expression unreadable. It was like she was waiting for me to make some kind of choice, to either give in or stand up and try to fight back. But what was there to fight for? What was left to save? I thought about my wife. I thought about everything we had built together. And then I thought about how easily it had all come crashing down. I thought about the years I had spent with her, the memories we had shared, and how they had all been tainted by the truth that had just been revealed to me. I couldn't believe it. I didn't want to believe it. But there was no denying what was right in front of me. She wasn't going to let me off easy. She wasn't going to give me a chance to explain, to justify my actions. And honestly, I didn't think I deserved that chance. What could I say? What could I say? What could I do to make this right? How could I possibly fix something that had been broken for so long? The girl took a step back, her eyes never leaving mine. She raised the camera slightly, as if preparing to record what came next, and I couldn't help but wonder what she was going to make me say, what she was going to make me do. I had no control. I had no idea what would happen after this moment. All I knew was that whatever came next would change everything. The world outside the car had begun to blur, the edges of reality fading into a haze. The steady beat of my heart, now racing wildly, echoed in my ears, drowning out everything else. My thoughts were a tangled mess, spiraling in every direction as I stared at the girl, the camera still raised in her hands. She hadn't moved an inch, her expression unreadable, and I was left feeling like a prisoner in my own skin. I could feel my palms sweating, my mouth dry, as the reality of the situation gripped me tighter. I was trapped, completely at her mercy, and there was nothing I could do to escape. The weight of everything she had revealed to me pressed down on me with a force I couldn't ignore. I wanted to scream, to break free from this nightmare, but all that came out was a weak breath, barely audible. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of emotions, betrayal, shame, confusion, anger all crashing over me with no way to stop it. The girl's gaze never wavered, and I couldn't escape the feeling that she was watching me, waiting for me to crack. I had thought I was strong. I had convinced myself that I could handle anything, that nothing could shake the foundation of my life. But this was beyond anything I could have prepared for. The realization hit me like a freight train. My entire world, everything I thought I knew about my wife, about my marriage, had been a lie. How could I have been so blind? How had I missed every warning sign? The truth was too painful to bear, but there it was, hanging in the air between us like an unspoken confession. My wife had betrayed me, not just once, but for years. And the man in the video, the one who had taken my place in my own home, had been part of a scheme that I never even saw coming. My late nights at work, my distractions, had all played into his hands. He had used my absence to slip in unnoticed, to tear apart everything I had worked for, everything I had loved. The girl's voice broke through my thoughts, sharp and cold. "You think this is just about your wife? You think this is just about him?" she asked, her words cutting through the silence like a knife. I didn't have an answer. What was I supposed to say? I wasn't sure what she wanted from me anymore. Was she trying to break me? To make me feel the full weight of what had happened? She had already succeeded in that. She stepped closer to the car, her figure looming large in the small space. "This is about justice," she said, her voice low but firm. "This is about making sure everyone knows the truth. About making sure they know what kind of people your wife and her lover really are." There was a finality in her tone, a certainty that made my stomach drop. She wasn't just trying to expose them, she was trying to destroy them. She was out for blood, and I had no idea what she was capable of. I felt a sense of helplessness flood through me, like I was being dragged down by a current I couldn't fight against. There was no way to fix this. There was no way to undo the damage that had been done. All I could do was watch as she prepared to unleash the full force of her revenge. The camera still hung in her hands, and I could see the coldness in her eyes as she looked at me, sizing me up, waiting to see if I would fight back or crumble. I was beyond the point of fighting. There was nothing left to protect, nothing left to defend. My life had already been shattered, and she was just the final blow. She didn't care about my remorse. She didn't care about my confusion or my regret. She had already made up her mind, and nothing I said or did could change that. The silence between us was suffocating, and I had to force myself to take a deep breath to try and steady myself. But the more I thought about what had happened, the more I realized how far down this rabbit hole I had gone. There was no way out. I had been betrayed, and now I was a spectator in my own life. She finally spoke again, her voice even, almost clinical in its tone. I know you're wondering why I'm doing this. You're probably asking yourself what makes me think I have the right to destroy your life like this. I swallowed hard, feeling a lump form in my throat. I didn't have the energy to answer her. I didn't have the words to explain myself. She didn't wait for me to respond. The truth is, I've been watching you for a long time, she continued, her eyes narrowing. I've been watching you and your wife, waiting for the right moment to expose everything. You're just another man who thought he could live in his own little world without consequences. Her words stung, but they also carried an uncomfortable truth. She was right. I had been living in my own bubble, oblivious to the destruction that had been brewing around me. I had been so focused on my own ambitions, my own success, that I had failed to see the cracks forming in my marriage. And now those cracks had grown into something far worse than I could have imagined. Her gaze softened, just for a moment, and I caught a glimpse of something else behind her cold exterior, a deeper pain, a sense of loss that mirrored my own. But it was quickly gone, replaced by the hardened resolve that had taken over her expression. I'm not doing this for fun, she said quietly. I'm doing this because your wife deserves to pay for what she's done to my family. And you deserve to feel what I felt. You deserve to feel the humiliation, the betrayal. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. What could I possibly say to that? How could I justify my actions, my failures, in the face of the damage I had caused? I was no better than the man she despised, the man who had destroyed her family. She reached down, pulling a small device from her pocket. You're going to watch, and you're going to understand. You're going to feel what I felt. She hit a button, and suddenly the screen of the camera flickered to life. The video of my wife and the man played again, the words he spoke echoing in my ears once more. This loser spends his nights at work, while I literally live in his house. I watched, helpless, as the video played on, the images of my life being torn apart right before my eyes. The man in the video had no shame, no remorse. He had taken everything from me without a second thought. And now this girl, this stranger, was forcing me to relive it, to face the truth of my own failures. She didn't stop the video. She let it play out, making sure I saw every single detail. And as the video ended, she looked at me with a sense of finality. You're going to feel this. You're going to feel this. You're going to understand the depths of what's been done. I could feel the weight of her words, the truth of them, sinking in. There was no turning back now. This was it. The end of everything I thought I knew. The destruction of everything I had built. I had no choice but to watch, to let the truth unfold, knowing that once it was done, nothing would ever be the same again.